In the quiet solitude of the American West, where the land stretches out to meet the endless sky, cowboys are often seen as symbols of rugged independence and quiet strength. They are men of the earth, familiar with the rhythms of nature and the harsh realities of life. But on one particular day, a cowboy named Jedediah was about to encounter something far beyond the ordinary scope of his work, something that would test the very limits of his compassion and change his life forever. Jed was out on a routine ride, checking the fences that bordered his sprawling ranch. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was a peaceful scene, the kind he had witnessed 1,000 times before. The only sounds were the gentle clip-clop of his horse, hooves, and the distant call of a lone hawk. But as he rounded a bend near an old, forgotten dirt track, a strange sight caught his eye. A burlap sack, tied shut, lay discarded by the side of the road. Curiosity piqued. Jed dismounted. It wasn't uncommon to find litter out here, but something about this sack felt different. It was lumpy, and there was a faint, almost imperceptible movement from within. He cautiously nudged it with the toe of his boot. Nothing. He thought perhaps it was just a wounded animal, a sad but not entirely unusual discovery. He leaned closer, his hand hovering over the knot, and that's when he heard it. A sound so faint, so delicate, it was almost swallowed by the wind. A tiny, muffled whimper. His heart skipped a beat. This was no animal. With a surge of adrenaline, his fingers fumbled with the coarse rope. The knot was tight, deliberately so. Panic began to set in as he struggled, the whimpering from inside growing slightly louder, more insistent. Finally, the knot gave way. Jed pulled the top of the sack open, his breath catching in his throat at the sight within. Tucked among some old rags was a baby, a tiny, fragile infant, no more than a few days old, with a tuft of dark hair and cheeks flushed from the cold. Jed stared in disbelief, his mind struggling to process the scene. Who could do such a thing? Abandoning a helpless baby in a sack? Leaving it to the elements? Anger and a profound sadness washed over him. He gently, carefully, lifted the baby from its rough confines. The infant was cold, but miraculously seemed unharmed. As he cradled the tiny bundle against the warmth of his leather jacket, two big dark eyes fluttered open and looked up at him. And then a tiny voice, barely a whisper, uttered a single heart-shattering word. "Mama." That one word pierced Jedediah's soul. He was a cowboy, a man accustomed to solitude and self-reliance. He wasn't a father. He wasn't a family man. But in that moment, holding this abandoned child, none of that mattered. A fierce, protective instinct he never knew he possessed surged through him. He looked around, scanning the empty landscape, a desperate hope that the mother might still be nearby, that this was all some terrible mistake. But there was only silence. The road was deserted, the tracks old. Whoever had done this was long gone. He knew he couldn't just leave the baby. He had to get her to safety, to warmth. Wrapping the infant as securely as he could in his own jacket, he mounted his horse, holding the precious bundle close to his chest. The ride back to his ranch house felt like the longest of his life. Every bump in the road made him flinch, his arm a protective shield around the baby. He urged his horse on, the setting sun now a fiery red orb on the horizon, a silent witness to the day's incredible events. Back at his modest ranch house, Jed went into a flurry of activity. He wasn't equipped for a baby. He had no crib, no diapers, no formula. He carefully laid the infant on his own bed, piling blankets around her to create a warm, soft nest. He managed to warm some milk, testing it on his wrist the way he'd seen in movies, and painstakingly fed the baby with a small spoon. She drank hungrily, her tiny hands clutching his calloused finger. As he watched her, a sense of overwhelming responsibility settled upon him. This little life was now in his hands. The next morning, Jed drove into the nearest town, and went straight to the sheriff's office. He explained the incredible story, his voice thick with emotion as he recounted finding the baby in the sack. The sheriff, a man who thought he'd seen it all, listened with a grim expression. An investigation was launched immediately, but the trail was cold. There were no witnesses, no leads. The baby, it seemed, had appeared out of nowhere. She was taken to the local hospital to be checked over, and doctors confirmed she was healthy, despite her ordeal. The news spread through the small town like wildfire. The story of the cowboy and the sack baby was on everyone's lips. People were horrified by the abandonment, but deeply moved by Yet's actions. While the authorities searched for the parents, the question of the baby's future loomed large. She was placed into temporary foster care, but Jed couldn't get her out of his mind. He visited her every single day, bringing small toys and simply sitting by her crib, a silent, watchful guardian. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. No family ever came forward to claim the child, who the nurses had lovingly named Grace. The bond between Jed and Grace grew stronger with each visit. He was the one who could make her smile, the one whose voice could soothe her when she cried. The rough-hewn cowboy had discovered a well of tenderness within himself he never knew existed. The ranch felt empty without her, the silence no longer peaceful but lonely. He knew what he had to do. It was a daunting prospect, a complete upheaval of his entire life. But looking into Grace's trusting eyes, he knew it was the only path forward. Jedediah, the solitary cowboy, began the legal process to adopt her. It was a long and arduous journey, filled with paperwork, interviews, and home studies. But he never wavered. He transformed a spare room into a nursery, learned how to change diapers, and read every book on parenting he could find. Finally, the day came. Standing before a judge, with a now gurgling Grace in his arms, Jedediah legally became her father. The man who had found her at her most vulnerable was now her forever family. The courtroom was filled with townspeople who had followed their story, their faces beaming with support. As the judge's gavel fell, a new chapter began for the cowboy and his daughter. Life on the ranch was different now. It was filled with the sound of laughter, the pitter-patter of tiny feet, and the occasional crayon drawing on the wall. Jed taught Grace how to ride a pony, how to spot constellations in the vast night sky, and the names of all the wildflowers that grew in the meadows. He was no longer just a cowboy, he was a dad. And Grace, the baby left in a sack, had found her home. She had a father who loved her more than words could say, a man who heard her first word and answered the call, not with a response, but with a lifetime of love. Their story became a local legend, a powerful reminder that sometimes the most unexpected discoveries lead to the most beautiful destinations, and that a family is not just about blood, but about the love that binds hearts together. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story of love and rescue. If you were as touched as we were, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content. We'll see you in the next video.